Lord Foppington from The Relapse by Sir John Vanbrugh. And again, he's named after his character, a favourite figure of the Restoration, the fop. Idle, affected, fashionable, and ridiculous.
I rise, madam, about 10 o'clock. I never rise sooner if it is the worst thing in the world for the complexion. Not that I pretend to be a beau, but a man must endeavour to look wholesome, lest he make so nauseous a figure in the side box the ladies be compelled to turn their eyes upon the play. So at 10 o'clock, I say I rise. Now, if I find it is a good day, I resolve to take a turn in the park and see the fine women. So huddle on my clothes and get dressed by 1.
The comedy of manners has been one of the staples of English theatrical fare ever since the Restoration. In the late 18th century, Sheridan used it. And in our own time, of course, it was the style brilliantly employed by Noel Coward.
I'm afraid I tire the company.
Not at all. Pray go on.
Why then, ladies?
But perhaps the finest example in our language is by Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest, a devastating lampoon of the late Victorians written in the 1890s. No theatre building survives from the late 17th century, but it is possible to get an idea of the layout of a Restoration playhouse by going to the north of England and looking at a theatre of a slightly later date, the Georgian Theatre in Richmond, Yorkshire. Now, the one thing the auditorium of a theatre tells you is precisely the sort of society for which it was built. Each section of society had its own allotted place in the auditorium. And because in the 17th and 18th century people went to the theatre not only to see but also to be seen, this was thought to be the best position, nearest to the stage and in full view of the rest of the audience. In the provinces, this would have been called the mayor's box, and the other boxes would have been filled by the gentry, what were called the carriage trade. This was called the servants' grill. The poor servants had to come early to reserve seats for their masters, but then they weren't allowed to watch the performance. So they had to stand out here, and this grill was used for communication. But I expect if the play was good enough, they wouldn't have been able to resist watching. And this is the gallery, perhaps the best view in the house for the peasants and hoi polloi. And you see this board here, this was put here specially so that they could express their feelings without damaging the wooden panels thus. And this is the pit. Here sat the squires, the sharpers, the whores. So all sections of society had a place in this sort of theatre, and they talked, and they commented, and they shouted out at the actors. And so the Restoration gave the English theatre critics as well as actresses, and both must have contributed to a truly exciting time. There were brand new playhouses filled with lively, robust audiences, and above all, dozens of new plays. The writing was highly inventive and individual, and the Restoration playwrights, we're only talking about a period of 30 or 40 years, were giving birth to a new line of plays, plays which mercilessly scrutinized society and which were peopled with stylized characters who talked wittily and brilliantly. This style of play has come to be called the comedy of manners.